Hey, I'm Midnight. I do free Deadlock coaching and some fast-paced guides. Laning is a very key stage in Deadlock, and as I've been coaching, I've seen a lot of people make a lot of the same mistakes, so let's talk about them. There's a bit more to this, but an overall blanket statement is just you want to push your first wave as hard as you can, so that way you can try to get Prio as soon as possible. If you're able to get wave Prio, it is great for then fighting your laning opponent because you will have your minions shooting them as well as yourself, giving you a very big advantage. And if your enemy backs off, you're in a great spot to look for denies to give yourself a small soul advantage. This is why in a lot of high elo games, you'll see both players go to one side of the wave and just push as hard as they can. As for what happens if your laning opponent manages to get wave prio before you do, and try to kill the minions while securing their souls, it's important to note that it isn't always good to go for melees on those minions because a good player after getting prio will shoot you if you try to go for that melees, and they can do a pretty significant amount of damage, which is worth more than just taking the toss up for the soul orb. Before 2 minutes, laning is easy. It's just try to get prio, try to poke the enemy down, deny any soul orbs you can. But after 2 minutes, the first small camp spawns. Now only one person is going to have the small camp on their side. If you want to play absolutely optimally, it's great to shove your wave, get wave prio, and then farm your small camp while the opponent pushes wave back. But for the vast majority of the player base, they aren't going to time this at exactly 2 minutes, and you're just going to notice the small camp spawns. And then when you notice that when the small camp spawn, it's great to shove your wave and grab the small camp. One more thing I wanted to add, that the biggest mistake I see when laning is positioning. When shooting minions, you should always be positioning behind cover to avoid getting poked from the enemies, and you should be positioning behind your wave to avoid getting poked from the minions. I guarantee you, if you're below Oracle and you go to one of your replays, you go to 8 minutes, you look at all damage and check how much trooper damage you took during the laning stage, you will be very, very surprised by just how much damage it is. People really do not respect troopers enough, and it's causing a lot of people to lose a lot of games. I had a player ask me this recently, so I want to do a breakdown of why it's good to do camps and boxes after you shove wave. If you're an experienced mobile player, you can skip to this timestamp. Basically, laning is a game of ping pong, and once you push your minions onto the enemy side of the map, unless they are freezing, which we will dive into freezing later, the wave is naturally going to push back to you. So if you go to take that camp while the waves are in the middle, both waves will just kill each other and you will have missed 4 minions or the entire wave. But if you shove your wave in, the wave will naturally be stacking and pushing back to you, so you will only miss 1 to 2 minions before the wave gets back to you and you can farm that wave. And if your opponent is also pushing the wave, you might not even miss any minions. Again, this is why freezing is good, but we'll get into that later. But basically, laning is just an ebb and flow, and excluding freezing, which if you are Oracle or below, you will not see in any of your games. If you shove the wave in, the wave will slowly push back to you, and that is a great timer to do things like boxes, camps, or roaming. The reason I call laning just a slightly more advanced version of Pong is because all you're trying to do is get the wave on their side of the court, then go do some side objectives. Side objectives can be box routes. I will put a couple of good box routes on the screen right now. Side objectives can be the small camp next to you, the medium camp when you get to 6 minutes in the game. Well, it's ping-ponged back to you. Come grab the wave, push it back, do some side objectives, and keep that rotation as an ebb and flow. Also, when doing sub-objectives like boxes and camps, it's important to note that you will get the most souls from killing a wave. So it is never better to do a box route or do a camp if you are losing a wave. You always want to be catching your waves, and then when you have your wave pushed, you want to go do other things. Because if you are losing one wave for one smaller medium camp, you are going to lose more souls than you made from farming that camp. And you are also depriving your team of that farm. Again, I cannot stress enough, the timing for roaming, boxes, and camps is all just when you shove the wave into their tower, you go do these things, and then you come back and catch your wave when it is shoved back. It gets a little more complicated than that when playing with a duo, because you might shove in your lane and then your duo might continue to shove in the lane or grab the lane when it's like halfway pushed and then you miss souls. So if you can be telling your duo like, hey, let's go do a box route, hey, let's go do a camp, or I'm going to go roam or whatever, it's good. But if you don't want to, that is just one of the banes of playing duo lane, and you kind of have to play around your duo, or if you go to a camp and then you see, hey, my dynamo is coming back to the lane to try to reshove it, even though it's pushing into us, you have to like stop doing that camp, go join your dynamo and push the wave so you don't miss more souls if he had just solo pushed the wave. Or even roaming, although normally you will not get back to your wave in time and you will have to ask someone to pick up your lane or just tank a little damage to your tower. So that is why it is super important to make sure your roams have value. The best time to roam is when your enemies have prio and have pushed in a wave pretty deep, and you can just get there quickly, try to kill them, and then come back. If your team has shoved in both lanes next to you, there's no real point in roaming because your enemies are just going to hug the tower and you're just going to waste a lot of your time. One of the most important skills with roaming, which a lot of players struggle with, is just when to cut your losses and call a roam dead. If you go to rotate over and the enemy immediately drops back, it's not good to overstay, try to force something, and then just waste more time where your laner can now siege your tower. And if you don't have a successful roam on a duo lane, it's not good to stay and to continue to hit the minions because you're basically just griefing your team by taking souls from them. And at the same time, you're letting your enemy have even more time alone where they could be pushing wave in and sieging your tower. So if a roam is dead, it is best just to cut your losses. When you're roaming, it's also very good to look at the top of the screen and see if your enemies are low. If you see one of the lanes next to you, the enemies are low, and they're kind of pushed in, it is a great time to roam. Another very important timing to note in the laning stage is 5 minutes because that is when boosts come up. When your enemies boosts come up, they can get back a lot faster to lane after you kill them, and they can also boost on a different lane for a roam. So if you kill your enemy, it's good to ping them missing, then say something in a game like they're in base with their boost up so your team knows. And also after 5 minutes, after you get a kill, you shouldn't be shoving wave too hard because the enemy could just boost on you and trade you back and nullify the lead you gained from the kill. However, if you're roaming to a solo lane, if your lane is not in immediate danger, say your duo is an Ivy and they're throwing Kutsu so the enemies aren't able to shove in wave that hard, it's not bad to help them shove in the extra wave because if you're before 8 minutes, you will be duplicating those souls and not leeching anything. And then you can go back to your lane. This is a technique called double soaking, where you have one player going to one lane, pushing a wave or two, and then coming back to the original lane, catching the wave that just got shoved in, and going back and forth between the two lanes, trying to be there when the majority of the minions die to get them really beefed up on souls. However, this is a technique that Valve has shown that they do not like, and they have done a lot of things to combat it in the past when it was prevalent, and I have a feeling they will continue to keep pushing back against this, so don't expect this to be a strong strategy when the game comes out. After 8 minutes, souls are no longer split between two people, so if you're in a duo lane, you should start farming camps, start roaming, start doing other things. You can be there to catch the wave if you want, but you aren't getting the 100% extra souls you were when two people are in lane, and now you're only getting 20% more, so it's good to be doing other things. As for when to fight and when not to fight, whenever you have more minions in your wave, you want to fight, and whenever the opponent has more minions in their wave and their wave is pushing, you do not want to fight. Basically, because when you take a fight, the troopers will also be shooting you. And like I mentioned before, they do a lot of damage. So there's a pretty significant advantage to have 2 more troopers in the wave shooting the enemy while you fight. Okay, let's talk about the concept I get a lot of questions about, which is freezing. Freezing this game is not that complicated compared to Dota, League, or any of the other games. It is literally as simple as when you have the wave on your side of the map, you just only shoot the minions when they are flashing. Unless you have more minions than your opponent, this will freeze the wave. It will make it so the wave does not push, and the wave will just kind of stay where it is. It is important to note that it is easier to hold a freeze if your opponent's wave has one more candle trooper than yours, because then their wave will always be doing more damage, and then if it ends up spiraling, so now they have 2 more troopers because they killed your wave so quickly, you can just kill one and keep the 1 trooper advantage, which makes the freeze much easier to hold than the completely neutral constant 4v4. So let's talk about why is freezing good. Freezing is very valuable against 7 players or other hyper carries. If the 7 shoves his wave into you, and then he goes to go ult basement, go grab the medium camp, go grab the small camp, if you just freeze the wave so it doesn't push back to him, he will lose more souls using his ult on basement, going to farm that medium camp, whatever he's doing, than if he had just stayed and caught that wave. Versus if you push the wave back into him, he gets the bonus souls of that camp, and then he can come back, grab his entire wave. So if you just freeze, you are denying him that wave. Freezing is also good if you kill your enemy laner earlier in the game to the point where respawn timers are so low that you cannot push the wave back into them before they respawn. You can just stop, hold a freeze, you can just stop and only last hit the minions. So that way your troopers takes the maximum amount of damage and a couple of them die before your enemy gets back and you deny them those minion souls. I also want to know, I know I'm making freezing sound very simple, but in this game it is just shoot the minions when they're blinking. The first couple times you try to freeze it will be bad for you because you won't fully know wave management and you'll miss a couple minions. Once you get in the habit of keeping your eyes on all 4 minions and knowing when they're about to die and shooting them right before they die, freezing will be a very powerful tool, but the first few times you do it, you will probably only get 2 out of the 4 minions and you'll miss 2 of them when they die. That is completely normal and to be expected, but after a little practice, you will get it down and you can be using it against your enemies. If you have died a couple times and the enemy is just permanently killing you, you can just set up a freeze. This will make it so you're very close to your guardian, you're still getting all your troopers, and you're in a lot less danger than if you had to push your wave into them and they could run you down and kill you. If you are in high elo and you understand what are good and bad matchups, you can even use this preemptively if you are in a very negative matchup. Say you're Abrams against a good Mirage who knows how to tornado your dash, you can just set up a freeze, and that way you make the best out of a negative situation. What are the disadvantages of freezing? You are by default giving your enemy Prio. This means if you're playing against a Lash or a character who likes to roam, they can go roam to one of the duo lanes. Also, you can freeze in duo lanes, but it's very difficult in solo queue because you basically have to explain to your duo like what freezing is, and it's just, I don't even bother to try to freeze in duo lanes. I pretty much keep this exclusive to solos. So it gives the enemy a free chance to roam. So if you're playing against someone like a Lash who does very, very well with lane prio, it is dangerous to freeze. He will lose more souls by roaming. So if you are pinging, hey, the Lash is roaming, the Lash is off vision, and you're very preemptive with when the enemy leaves, it's not that bad, but if he does get a successful roam or two, it can be pretty bad for your team. If you're playing against a character like Seven, who can't really roam, it is great to hold a freeze against him. Now, how do you break a freeze? It is hard in Deadlock. In Dota, you can pull a neutral camp to get your minions to attack it, to break the freeze, and in League, the tower does a ton of damage, so it's much more difficult for an enemy to hold a freeze, and you can just shove in the wave, and you can just shove the wave into your enemy to break the freeze. But in Deadlock, it is very difficult to break the freeze. I have a feeling they will add something to combat this later, because I don't think freezing is going to remain as OP as it is right now. But basically the only way to break a freeze is hope your enemy messes up by shooting the minions and pushing the wave back to you. Or by pushing the wave really hard so 2 waves go into your enemy's turret and then it will break the freeze. But that is very difficult to do as you have to kill the enemy's second wave very, very quickly. Well, on top of that, they're shooting you and they're under their guardian. But basically the only way you have control to break it is just to shove wave into their tower really, really hard. You can also ask one of your teammates to roam and help you break the freeze if you need to. Again, by just shoving really hard. The final note I will add for laning is it really ends at 8 minutes or when you lose your first guardians. I see a lot of people in MSR and below staying in their lane to like 15-16 minutes. This is very prevalent in MOBAs where the laning stage lasts too long in lower elos. Once your guardian falls, it is much better to leave, ask for one of your teammates to pick up the lane, go gank one of your enemy lanes, start doing jungle, whatever, but you do not need to stay in your lane. And it's better for you to just be playing the match like you are out of laning stage because you are. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I make these guides pretty quickly and pretty fast paced. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. You guys can comment anything you want to add below. Sometimes I find it a little difficult to explain some of these concepts, but I do think with freezing, it really is that simple of just try only last hitting minions and you will notice, hey, my wave isn't moving. If there's anything you'd like to add, please leave it in the comments. I read all of them. Also, if you have any constructive criticism, I love to hear it. Just don't phrase it like you are a piece of work, okay? Just be nice about it. I love to hear it. I love to work off of it. If you say it in a rude way, I'm just going to leave you on red. But if you say it in a nice way, I love to hear it. And constructive criticism really helps my channel grow. Let me know if you want more guides like this, and as always, keep it real.